Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the DANCNG SOBR podcast. So happy to have you again here with us. I want to give a big shout out to Espacio 1839 for having us here in their space and allowing us to do our podcast here. Don't forget to visit Espacio1839.com on the internet, or if you want to come see them in person, it's 1839 East 1st Street in Boyle Heights. Come check them out. They have a lot of things here, and come and get some stuff. This week, our guest is a local hero, a random hero, El Random Hero, Erick Huerta. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the DANCNG SOBR podcast, and today we have the Lonely Samurai, the El Random Hero, El Señor de Boyle Heights, Erick Huerta.
Did you say that because I have my hair in a bun?
Yeah, but I forgot. No, when you used to do your poetry more often, you had the samurai thing going on.
Yeah, what was it? Yeah, I was confused. I was very confused. I didn't know who I was. I thought I was Chicano, so I am not.
Oh, you're not Chicano now?
No, I'm not. Just once I graduated ELAC, I got out of it.
Oh, that's funny. Most people go to ELAC, discover it, and then stay with it. That's like been the narrative here pretty much with people
the closest I get is chipster. Chicano hipster.
Yeah.
that for sure I'll claim all day, every day, and twice on Sunday.
So tell me a little bit about the samurai thing.
Well, so for folks that know me, they know that I like anime. I mean, I fucking have it literally on my arm. That's one of my favorite comic books of all time, Lone Wolf and Cub. And what you're referencing is when I was taking poetry workshops at Corazón del Pueblo, at Casa 0101 back in the day. Back in the day, I wrote a poem called "The Samurai That Smells Like Chorizo" because I was trying to reference one of my favorite animes, which is Samurai Champloo, and it's about a person looking for their dad who smells like sunflowers. So I was like, oh, cool. Like, just reference all of that for myself. And then, it's just, I mean,
I'm sure you told me that back then. That was like 2008 or 9.
Way back when.
Yeah. I don't remember.
Yeah. When I wasn't as embarrassed as I am now.
Why? No, that's dope history. That's really dope history. I mean, yeah. I mean, I'm sure that people that meet you nowadays and just see you on your bike and talking shit don't know that you have this rich history of poetry.
I do. I've been privileged enough to be in the neighborhood for a long time.
Let's go back like we do here. As in, we're going to start from the beginning, Erick. We're going to talk about the mystery of Erick Huerta's family.
There's no mystery.
I've known you for 100 years. I don't think I've ever met anybody in your family. Right?
No.
Yeah, ever. Yeah.
No, because we didn't meet until after my family moved out of LA to Utah.
Yeah, they moved. Yeah. So they became Mormons.
They became people who like affordable housing, yeah.
Okay.
And a cheaper cost of living out of state with family out there. Yeah.
That's cool. All right, so then let's go back to where you grew up, where you were born, and let's just take it from the top.
For sure. So I was born in Mexico City. Well, at the time when I was born, Distrito Federal, right, DF. I know this whole rebranding of Mexico City, Ciudad Mexico has been happening the last couple of years, but that tells you, who's about it and who's not when you're repping like the old school, right? So that's the way I grew up with telling people, my parents are my mom is from Michoacán, my dad is from Puebla. When they were in their 20s, they were both living in DF. And that's when I was born. That's when I came into the picture. So it's like a little mix of like, I'm part Chilango, Michoacano, Poblano, but we were only there till I was 7, and I grew up here in Boyle Heights in the United States after that. So it's a little bit of everything in there.
Yeah. Do you have memories of Mexico then?
I do. I have very faint memories. They keep getting fainter and fainter the older I get. But it's just memories of being a kid, going to school, my mom making me orange juice with an egg inside and just like whipping it up and sending me off on my way, being in the pool.
That was like quick breakfast.
Yeah, protein breakfast. That shit was bomb. And when I tell people that you put eggs in your orange juice, they're like, gross. But just memories of that, of just being a kid, going to school, birthday parties, having fun, and also living at my great-grandma's ranch in Michoacán también, because in the transition from leaving DF to come to the United States, we lived over there for a couple of months in that transition time. So that was the best time of my life because I was a kid.
You left school.
I
You
didn't
got
go to
freedom.
school. I didn't have any responsibilities. It was just like every day was an adventure. Like one day would be.
And you were little enough where like nothing mattered. Just
No.
like fucking let's do
No,
it.
like it wasn't like I was like, really conscious or self-aware of what was happening and the changes that were happening.
You were about to have your life rocked.
Yeah, I was just going along with it. Like, cool, this is where we are now, right? So, yeah. It was like going on like trips to go hunt iguanas, to go make soup, catching chickens to make mole.
fucking
I don't know how I have this memory, but this memory of like walking like what seemed a very long distance to go milk a cow on some hill.
Yeah.
Like it fucking before the
That was
sun
a rite of
rises.
passage back then.
Yeah. So like a lot of
That was your
like,
samurai training.
faint
You must climb the
memories
hill and milk the cow.
of just running around in huaraches, like looking like a little raggedy kid, having the time of my life. And
Do you have any memories of actually crossing?
No. So I actually am one of those folks that, kind of just slipped through the cracks. So when it was time for my family transition, my mom and my sisters, everybody else, they had to do it the same way everybody does, right? You fucking go against the wall, you cross, you do that fucking physical activity that is required of you to do that. But at myself, I had to just pretend to be my cousin.
Oh, okay.
Like I had family I had a cousin who was the same age as me. And it was a whole thing where they're like, okay, you're going to be your cousin's name. And if anybody asks you, we're your parents, right? Just kind of like prepping me. It turns out I didn't have to do anything. I just got in the car. I fell asleep. And like geography wise, it doesn't work out to go to sleep in Mexico and wake up in Boyle Heights. But in my mind, that's how that memory works, that I fell asleep in Mexico. And I woke up in Boyle Heights right off.
Wherever you woke up,
First.
for you it was already Boyle Heights. It didn't really matter, I guess.
Yeah. So for me, it was easy transition. You cross the border in the middle of the night. The fucking border patrol didn't even bother waking me up for anything. They're just like, okay, cool. You got the kids' papers. Hop on through.
7
years old.
What year was that?
That was 1991.
Damn. I already had a kid by then.
Yeah, the year before the riots, before like so much shit was popping off, like, Prop 187, all that stuff that happened in the 90s in LA.
And so your parents came straight to Boyle Heights?
Yeah. It's, typical story like everybody else. Boyle Heights has been known as like the Ellis Island of the West Coast for a lot of different reasons.
Yeah.
And in my experience, it was that because we had extended family here. Yeah. When all of our extended family was making the trip north, they would pass through us, in Mexico City, and they would stay with us until they continue on in their journey. So when it was time for us to come up here, they returned the favor, by letting us stay with them for like however much time we needed till we got on our feet.
I'm like having fun with this because like this is the most I've ever heard about your story. Because even though we hang out a lot, we don't really like talk a lot about our personal stuff a lot.
No.
So it's really cool to have this now, and I'm like having like these like oh wow, that's fucking cool. Like I never knew that about you, and I'm starting to like put together the pieces of the puzzle that is Erick, the Rubik's Cube.
It's a very crooked puzzle.
Yeah. So where did you go to elementary school?
Oh, we bounced around a lot because of the whole staying with relatives.
Yeah.
So the first place I ever lived in when I moved to the United States with my family was down the street on First and Cummings. From there, it was just jumping from one place to another. I remember living across the street from Roosevelt High School with a tia. At some point, because I was looking at my transcripts from school from LAUSD, I even lived in Pacoima, as far as Pacoima.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Yeah, and then we spent a good chunk of time in South Central. I lived in Long Beach for 3 years.
That's why you're so complicated, Erick.
Yeah.
Seriously, I mean, that has a lot to do with it, just moving around a lot.
It was a combination of like my parents staying with relatives and relying on support networks to be able to, to move from one place to another, work, being in other places. So they go where the work is. And yeah, just kind of floating around like that until my senior year of high school. That's when we started living consistently in Boyle Heights. And I have been living consistently in Boyle Heights since 2002. That's when I graduated high school.
Where'd you graduate from?
from Roosevelt.
Ciao.
Yeah.
Rough Riders. I know that your mom was a street vendor. I don't know if she still is, but right?
Yeah. She used to sell tamales. That was the side hustle. It's something that she picked up from one of her tias, and her tia had like one of those spots, one of those coveted spots that was unspoken, but everybody kind of knew that if you...
That's your spot. Yeah.
That's your spot. And it was what used to be in front of the Big Buy, what the Walgreens is. Yeah.
That's a big spot.
So,
dude.
you know, she was there. She would sell
I probably
her
bought
tamales.
tamales from her back in the days myself.
Probably. Yeah. You know, it's like a lot of the street vendors in the neighborhood. They're consistent. They're there all the time. You get to know them. You recognize them. You build a relationship with them. So they moved. Eventually, I forget why, but they had to move from the Big Buy over to another spot on Cesar Chavez. And then from there, it was just, you know, my mom took it over and just kept it consistently until she couldn't do it anymore. Because there was a restaurant across the street. It was on Chavez and Fickett right there. There was a restaurant across the street that got, like, I don't know, jealous or like spiteful or something. But it's actually something that's pretty common, right? A street vendor will set up somewhere near a restaurant or a business, and then said business or restaurant will be like, well, that's unfair. The street vendor doesn't pay taxes, fees, permits, licenses, doesn't pay all the things that a brick and mortar does. So they're like, I don't want them taking my quote unquote customers, and that's when they call the cops.
That sucks.
Yeah, and then they just burned the spot. So
wow. So ever since, like, I think, well, not, I don't know when it started, but since I've known you in my memory, like, you were part of, like, the whole, like, Dreamers movement. I don't know what to call it, if that makes any sense. The Dreamers movement and all that. And, I mean, that became a huge part of your identity, right? At that time. I don't know if it still is, but can we talk about that and tell us how, like, the immigrant thing became a part of your identity and how you, you know, made it, like, a thing for you?
No, that's an apt way of describing it.
Should we go back to journalism first, or should we get into that first?
But they're both tied together.
Yeah, because, all right, so Eric and I met at East LA College when I was taking a couple journalism classes just to learn how to write better. And we were both writing for the paper back then, and you had already been there a few years. And that's when I met Eric and Chris.
Yeah.
So take us into that, how, like, journalism and, you know, the Dreamers movement came together for you.
Yeah, so the Dreamer movement is an apt description. I think through very much the fault of our own movement back then, we coined that term because we were always saying dreamer, 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 right? Until people got it, and that became part of the lexicon to describe somebody who was brought at a young age to the United States, grew up here, assimilated, you know, was able to go through education, higher education, and all these other things, but still didn't have papers or a permanent, like, citizenship or residency, right? So that's how most people come to understand a person in that situation as, quote unquote, a dreamer. And that word itself comes from the federal legislation, the DREAM Act, which was something that has been around a few decades now. And it's basically legislation that says, you know, folks in my situation who were brought here at a young age through merit of, like, education, military service, or some other, like, stipulations would eventually be able to get, you know, legal status, you know, through that law. It was something that we fought for a long time ago on several different occasions. It never, like, made it beyond, like, the Senate or the House or one of those two places. Right, to be able to go up to the president and get signed into a law. But in that fight to push that law, that's where a movement was built of, like, undocumented youth from all over the country to, you know, to get together, to build community, to organize, and to support each other. So for me, that I became involved in that movement, in the immigrant rights movement, and the DREAM Act movement, back in 2006, 2007, when I was in ELAC, and I started ELAC in 2005. So it's like a whole journey because that aspect of my life, being a dreamer, I don't actively identify one. I'm just referencing it to, you know, make it easier for folks to keep keep following along. But yeah. I'm one of those folks that have been very self-aware and very conscious of being undocumented in this country since day one. Right. It was something my parents told me, that you don't tell people, you don't blab it out. You don't put that noise out there. You just keep it to yourself. So that really just like fucked with my head growing up, really impacted like my decision making and like my aspirations or lack thereof in terms of like what would be available for me as an undocumented person in the future growing up. So, I just kind of became really disenfranchised. I was like, fuck this. Like, how am I going to grow up in this country and be brought here and be told that I'm, here to do better than my parents and have all these opportunities and access to things. But at the end of the day, after I graduated high school, all the opportunities I had was just manual labor, which is nothing wrong with that, right? Yeah. Like, that's honest work, that's dignified work. And I know a lot of homies that do that. But for myself, I didn't want that. I went to school. I was good at it,
And you were also being told that you're not going to do that because you're going to school and you're going to do something different.
Exactly.
What they always told us.
So, it was a little contradiction in terms of like, this is why we brought you here, so you can do better than us. Yeah. But like in the real world,
here's an extra challenge.
Yeah, in the real world, it's a completely different thing. So, it took me a while to apply to go to ELAC because I was just like, nah, like, I don't work, I don't have money, like always making up excuses. Why not to go? Until one day I was like, you know what? Like the homie like was really like being positive and put me onto it and be like, look, you can just go and apply. And if they say no, then they say no. And if they say yes, then now you can go. And that's exactly how I ended up at ELAC. I was like, cool, let me go to the admissions office. Let me try to apply. I did all the paperwork. And then when it came time to talk about like having a social or whatever, I told them I don't have one. And then they're like, oh, that's cool. Here's an extra form for you to sign. You're good. You are now enrolled at East LA Community College.
All that stress that you thought about that whole time is just like that one little thing.
It's just one simple form, But that's also speaking to all the work that a lot of organizers and a lot of folks in the movement had done up until that point.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
Because in order for me to...
Yeah, nothing has come this easy.
No. In order for me to just get that form and be able to enroll in college and pay in-state tuition versus out-of-state tuition, these were fights that had been happening since like the 90s to get legislation passed in the state. Yeah, in the state to get, undocumented students the same rights as any other California resident. Yeah. So, after that, it was just... it was pretty like straightforward path for me because I enrolled in ELAC. I saw all the classes that were available. I saw that they had journalism, and you know how sometimes you can double dip classes to meet certain requirements for transferring. Mm-hmm. I saw that journalism fulfilled some English requirements, and I was like, oh, cool. Like I really wanted to try that because in high school I had a chance to do that, but it didn't work out. But now here I am at ELAC. I could take that as a class that meets requirements and also, lets me try it out and see what my curiosity takes me with it. And that's all she wrote, man. That was it. Like I enrolled in journalism, like the 101 class with Gene Stapleton, the OG, the triple OG at ELAC, who's actually still teaching there. That's great. And after that first class, she saw what I could do, and she's like, "You're really good at this," and encouraged me to take the other classes that are basically became my AA degree in journalism from ELAC. Yeah.
So at the same time that you were learning all this journalism, you were also learning like the Chicanismo stuff. You were taking Chicano studies and learning all that. Yeah. And getting more involved with the Dreamers and all that at the same time. So tell us about how like you then became like a face for it.
Oh man, this is not a face you want in front of any movement. Because I'm a wild idiot, man. Like, especially back then. I used to say so many wild things that I'm like, wow, for sure in this current culture of politics and, how things are, I would not be getting away with the wild ass shit I used to say all the time. But, that speaks to the times of how things were and where my levels of maturity and, consciousness were at the time. But I had this triple layer going on in my life at that time where like I was really finding myself in my writing and in journalism at ELAC. And as soon as I became comfortable at a certain level, I started applying that to being a neighborhood blogger for Boyle Heights, because that's where I was, right? And at the time, I had an iPhone. I had the very first iPhone, and like, you know, now smartphones are like a pain in the ass and all these things, but when that first iPhone came out, it was literally a computer in the palm of my hand.
Yep.
And to be able to record audio, video, pictures, take notes, browse the internet, all of that stuff that we take for granted now. I'm old enough to remember when that was like the most fucking revolutionary thing in the world. And I took that as a tool and became a fucking neighborhood metiche. So what I was applying in school, I applied to real life. You know, I started writing about folks like Nico, you know, about the stuff he does with like Los Poets del Norte, when he had that shop that was Saintly on 4th and Mott, all that stuff. I wrote it about murals. Everything was going on in the neighborhood to the point that big news institutions like the LA Times would see what I was writing and then just take the idea and then make it their own. Like that happened a bunch of times where I was like, wow, this is not even a coincidence anymore. They're just like literally like just, you know, jocking my shit. So I started doing that. And then at the same time, I was also getting more and more involved in the Dreamer movement, because through the school newspaper, I started writing opinion pieces and news pieces about topics related to that. So I would profile like the club at school. There was a support group for undocumented students. I would talk about legislation updates, or like when at the time Governor Schwarzenegger would veto legislation that would support undocumented students in college. So I was like in the mix everywhere. And through the newspaper, that's how I was able to connect to the movement, because people noticed that I was that one fool in the school newspaper at ELAC writing about undocumented student issues. And they reached out to me. They're like, yo, man, we like your writing. We see what you're doing. We think you would be awesome if you come join us. And like that was one of the first times where like I really had to decide for myself which lane I had to pick. Because, you know, I went to Jean and I talked to her about like, oh, like, you know, this club is like hitting me up and da-da-da-da-da. And she just broke it down like straight down the middle. That, you know, as a journalist, you have to be objective, quote unquote objective, right? You can't eschew the facts. You have to present things as they are. And I had to make a decision for myself. Either I continue, you know, on the straight path of being a journalist and follow that tradition, or I go the other way and I become an activist and just, you know, do what that means. But somewhere along the line, I realized I can do both. Because, you know, the American News Institution is bullshit. I think a lot of people have seen that in the last couple of years, in the last decade or so, how biased it is, how unfair it is, all these problems that, like, at one time I realized that I didn't want to be a part of that. So I was like, fuck this. I'm going to take the skills that I learned in the school newspaper and apply that to activism, because there was a need for folks to be on social media, to talk to reporters, and to be the face of a movement. And that actually happened, because as I got more and more involved in like movement work for undocumented students and youth and all this other stuff, you know, I signed up to be the comms dude, the media guy, because that's the skills I had. That's what I brought to the table. And whenever we would get hit up by any news institution, Univision, LA Times, whatever, nobody would want to do it or be able to do it, right? You know, people are in school, they got their lives going on. Not everybody can drop everything they're doing and go fucking do an interview for 30 minutes. So me being the person I am, I was like, fuck it, I'll be on camera. What you want me to talk about? Bam, 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 bam. Because I could just, like, off the top of my head, like, have all the talking points about, like, this is what we're doing. This is why we're fighting. This is why we're protesting. This is why we need your support. And those opportunities just kept coming and coming and coming. And nobody else was available. Erick was the one that was available. So by default, I became, like, for a hot minute, like, a face of the movement. And I was pretty much everywhere.
How do you think things are now for Dreamers compared to then?
Then, comparing then to now, it's a completely different culture. When folks my age were coming up, right, we were still living in fear, what we call living in the shadows, right? Living in, like, in the closet, as another kind of metaphor. Double so for folks that were queer or non-gender binary. They were in the double, triple closets. So, I mean, it's something that is very weird to feel like I'm owed like a thank you or like some sort of gratitude for doing all the work that I did, when the whole point of doing all that work was to, like, in the same vein of my parents, right? we're doing this so y'all don't have to struggle as hard as we did. So it's something I've been processing and continue to process over these years of like, I did all this work so the next generation wouldn't have to fucking, struggle and like deal with all the bullshit that we had to and have more opportunities available to them. But somewhere, if I'm being completely honest, in the back of my mind and, in the back of my heart, I'm like, well, I deserve to be thanked for everything that I did. Like, shit. Like, we were out there the movement was out there getting arrested, pushing policy, fucking haranguing Obama until he passed the DACA, Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals. That's the current work permit that I have. We changed shit. We literally changed shit as a movement. And it all started because we were just like in our own little communities supporting each other. And eventually through the power of the internet, we connected with each other. And we became a whole fucking movement.
That's what I say, through the power of like large numbers.
Yeah.
Because that's what's most important.
Exactly.
One of the things that I remember the most about all that was when I first saw the T-shirt, and it's crazy how something this small means so much, but just a T-shirt that said undocumented and unafraid.
Yeah.
I was like, damn, like just those words together. It's like, fuck, that's powerful, And yeah, that lifted like the fear off of a lot of people,
It was a whole campaign. It was a whole summer. By that time, the movement was national. We were all on GChat and like fucking talking to each other and coordinating. All that work became the foundation for what is now known as United We Dream, like the most prominent nonprofit organization for undocumented youth. So that work was like a summer campaign to be like, you know what, fuck this. Like, we're not going to live in the shadows anymore. We're not scared. Like, we got to a point where like we have to keep pushing the boundaries of where our activism, where our protesting is going to go. And as we kept getting more and more involved and became more and more public, giving there was folks that gave testimony in the fucking U.S. Senate in a time and an environment that was like, you saying you're undocumented in that kind of space meant a lot of different things. And it was just eventually like just growing and growing and escalating like any other movement, right? Because for us, there was a lot of folks in those movements that had come from families that organized, that were, a lot more ahead of the curve in terms of like movement building and social consciousness. So for folks like me who just came into it not knowing anything, I look to those folks for guidance and leadership of like, this is where we're going, this is what we're gonna do. And every time, we had strategy meetings and we talked about where things are gonna go, we would always look back to what everybody else did before us, right? We would look at the civil rights movement, MLK, like, Malcolm X, Cesar Chavez, everybody who's organized before us. We would just look at what they did and be like, bam, that's what we need to do. We need to kick it up a notch. We need to fucking get arrested. We need to go do civil disobedience. We need to tell everybody we're fucking here. We're loud. We're proud. We're not scared. We'll fuck shit up. Like, and that's how eventually like it grew to that, right? Because it became like a rite of passage to be able to say, damn, yeah, I'm out here. I'm undocumented. What's up? Like, what's good?
This goes back to like how you say that like you made it easy for other people, because there's so much work that has been done before. And I always, like when my kid was young and she saw protesters, I saw like, always be grateful for those protesters, because like they're protesting for something that makes your life easy. Like the reason why your life is easy right now, and being a young Mexican in East LA, is because of a lot of the fights that have been fought before you got here. And then it gets into more of like the work that goes behind the scenes. Like, I'm not a meetings person, but you have been and sat in so many fucking meetings. Like the number of meetings that you've sat in to strategize and to, come up with plans is insane. It's crazy how much work goes behind the scenes into these things. And I've seen how it works, but I've never participated like that long, but I have participated in a few things. And I'm always grateful for the people that do it, because that's a tremendous part of the iceberg, right? Let's call it the iceberg. And like all the shit that happens behind the scenes, from a concept to gathering people to organize and then to create that into a movement, is like all baby steps that push it forward. And for that, I thank you. So if you've never been thanked,
thank you.
If you've never been thanked, I thank you.
I appreciate that.
On behalf of my child too. So
yeah, I think every activist wants to hear that, but I think at the same time, any real quote unquote real activist has also come to a place in their own, way of like, yeah, this is what we do.
Yeah.
Is it nice to be thanked? Hell yeah. Is it nice to be appreciated? Of course. But that's movement work. That's that's fighting for liberation for everybody.
That's your art, I guess. Like, we all have the thing that we do just because.
Yeah. I mean, and the way you talk about it, man, like, it trips me out because I don't think about it like that anymore.
No, because you just do it. You're in the act of doing it, and you're in the act of, like, that's what I want to push forward, or that makes me passionate and I want to protect those people, and so you just do it. And then, but I mean, there's a lot of work that goes behind it.
Yeah, I mean, in many ways, I like so many other folks in movement work, I ended up becoming like a professional activist, I guess, quote unquote, because my day job is at a nonprofit. It's for advocacy.
Well, I did want to get into that. So all of these things that you've picked up. So learning about journalism, working on newspaper, writing your own blog, being on social media, like one of the early people to really jump on social media and use it as a tool, to organizing all together, like became your job. This is what I do, So let's talk about how you slid into the social media DMs to get that.
It became a natural progression as the evolution of social media continued to grow and continue to meet the needs and set the precedent for the needs of what people wanted, right? So being there, like the first social media that I ever gone to was MySpace, 2004. Like my handle for any social media you ever see me on, El Random Hero, has been the same since MySpace. It's 2004.
Your blog too, right?
And my blog,
El
everything.
Random Hero.
That's just the brand that I ended up picking up with.
But let's dig into why. Why is that your name?
So I picked El Random Hero because, like any impressionable youth, I was watching Jackass at the time that it was coming out in real time, and of course I was fucking mimicking what those pendejos were doing. Right? That shit was hilarious to see these white boys.
It's still hilarious.
Fucking around and doing all this shit and dick and fart jokes y todo eso. And I remember watching one episode. With Ryan Dunn, who passed away,
R.I.P. Ryan Dunn.
Yeah, and he used to call himself Random Hero.
Oh, shit.
So I was like, oh, that's a fucking cool name. Like, that's a cool, handle, right? So I was like, well, I don't want to bite his style all the way, so I'm just going to put El in front of it because I'm Mexican. So I was like, since that day, I became El Random Hero.
I had no idea that's where it came from. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
And it also, feeds into, your samurai fucking, because samurais don't really, they're alone, they're random, they come out, I don't know.
I mean, it's something I just saw and thought it was cool, but eventually somehow, that's who I became.
Little things like that stick with us.
Yeah.
But, so go on. So then you ended up working in social media and you were now the go-to guy.
Yeah. I think for a lot of young people today that are going into the working world and are working with social media, there is a default level of you're the young person. You're good at social media, you get placed at your job site as the person that's good at that because you're young and you know how to do that kind of stuff. So for a long time in the beginning of social media, I was that young person that knew how to do everything, and that came with money.
Yeah, at one time you were the only guy. And it wasn't even a available position yet.
No.
Because I remember when you were doing it, I was like, wait, you're doing what?
Yeah.
For what? For who?
To put it in context, I've been doing this for so long that I was doing workshops
to teach people.
To explain people, this is what a hashtag is, this is how you use it, this is what this platform is, this is how you use it. I see.
Yeah, I took one of those from you. Yeah, that's awesome. That's how I learned a lot of things. So I learned little pieces here and there, but when I took your workshop, I put it all together in a succinct way. And now, that's every company has that position open. It's not just, you don't just give it to the receptionist to do. They've learned that it's a dedicated path. That you need somebody behind the wheel doing that. Yeah, dude, that's awesome.
Yeah.
So let's rewind just a little bit. And let's talk a little bit about your photography hobby, because you also started taking photography when you were at ELAC, right?
Yeah. So again, for my AA degree at ELAC, there's a list of required classes you need. And for that journalism degree, photography. The intro for photography is one of those classes. So in 2009, I took the black and white integer photography class, right, where you're learning to develop frame, use aperture settings, all that technical stuff in your camera. But because ELAC has a fucking dope ass dark room, I was also learning how to develop and expose my own rolls of film and pictures.
Nice.
So from that class, that's where it started. It started out as a necessity to fulfill a requirement, and then I just loved it. Like it became like a secondhand thing to want to just take pictures and document things, because it was something I was also doing actively on my phone at the time. You know, taking pictures of murals, buildings, things that were happening in the neighborhood on social media. So it's the same as like a lot of things that I had going on at the same time. I just kept up with it. I kept progressing with it and kept learning and kept, you know, just kept wanting to keep growing and learn more and more about it, to a point where it became it just became one of my foundational tools in my toolbox of like skills.
And you still shoot film, huh?
I shoot film because I'm an idiot. I'm basically paying to post pictures on Instagram at this point.
You know, that's hilarious. I mean, it's cool. I mean, if I had like a lot more disposable income, I mean,
that's my vice, right? Yeah. That's what I tell people. Should I be doing drugs and other things? No.
But, I mean, it's cool. It's beautiful. I love the process too. I don't have the patience for it. That's why when digital finally came out and I got my first digital pro camera, that's when I just went crazy, because I didn't have to wait for it. I edited myself, and it just like
and
it was a whole instant thing.
I picked up from you as well. Like when I started getting more and more into digital photography, I would always like rely on you to learn a few things here and there on top of the stuff I was learning on my own.
So all of these skills that you've picked up along the way, of course, have given you this professional job now, and you're like, you know, you're a man in the working world. And you're doing well with all that. Congratulations on all that. But still, you still stay active on the side with a lot of other things like bike advocacy and stuff like that. And also you still write for LA Taco, sometimes every once in a while, right? I'm not sure how that works. But I know that you still do a lot of things on the side. Tell us a little bit about like your bike stuff especially, which is like the stuff that I love, your advocacy for that and the groups that you work with.
I think like a lot of people today, whether we want to or not, we have side hustles. Yeah. Right? Or
it's
you turn a passion.
We turn hobbies into side hustles.
So, you know, it's one of those things that keeps you busy, it keeps you going, keeps you motivated. And for me, being a bike advocate, being a bike rider is a big part of my life, because it's also tied to the movement work I did back in the day. So back in 2011...
Because you didn't have licenses.
Yeah, because we didn't have licenses. As undocumented people, we had to get around. So when I started going to ELAC, I started riding my bike to ELAC, because I was like taking night classes that would get out like at 11 p.m. and waiting for the bus at 11 p.m. is not the business. So I was like, you know what? Let me get a bike. And sure enough, you know, I would get home sooner or sometimes even faster than the bus would, right? Yeah. So that became like my entry point into like, cool, I'm going to ride my bike to school and home. And then that turned into like a whole like lifestyle, realizing that like there's a whole bike community right out there in LA. And that's how I also just started incorporating it into my activism, right? Because I had all these skills. I learned how to be an organizer. So, of course, it made sense to take those same skills and apply them to bike advocacy, because I ended up connecting with the homies who do that kind of work. And then from there, I've been part of People for Mobility Justice basically since 2011 when I first got involved with that. And that all started when me and the homie Laura, Jose, we were all riding our bikes together and having the time of our lives. And then in 2010, there was a big campaign to push the federal DREAM Act. It didn't pass. That was happening toward the end of the year, like around November and December. So the movement was like, fuck, that was like our big moment to finally make something happen. It didn't. So, you know, as a movement, when you have big moments like that, you come back, you circle up, you know, you regroup and you figure out what the next steps are. But the three of us were like, damn, that sucks. Like, we should do something fun. that'll kind of help inspire folks coming into the new year. So that's when we decided to connect with an advocacy group that was in Orange County, back then known as the Orange County Dream Team, because we had that solidarity with each other with LA and OC. And we're like, yo, we should do a bike ride where we ride from LA to the OC in solidarity for like the Dream Act. And that's pretty much where it started for me. Like,
I did that right.
Yeah.
I didn't know that was like the first thing you guys did. That's awesome, dude.
That was the first time we organized ourselves in terms of like a bike ride and took the lead in terms of like making sure people were safe, that we had mechanics that could support, that we had equipment to help people, that we gave bike safety workshops so people will feel comfortable riding their bikes.
I remember that ride. I was like, man, why are you guys waiting for the slow people? But I get it now. Yeah, you don't leave people behind, especially in large groups, especially when you go that far away from home. You don't want to leave like people stranded. But
it was all about keeping the group together. No one got left behind, being supportive.
Yeah, no, that
was all about being in solidarity with each other.
I learned a lot on that ride, and that was my first long ride. It was 40 miles.
Yeah,
that was
50
my
miles.
First,
50 miles.
Right? Yeah, it was my first. But there was a lot of breaks, but
damn,
that was fun.
And that's how it started. I mean, ever since that first ride where we organized in support of the Dream Act in 2011, I have been consistently doing that all these years. And I just even did one last week where we just did a food ride going around East LA, going to different spots, munching, riding around as a group.
And now you're being like brought in by other groups to do it for them, right?
Yeah, yeah. Now as a board member of People for Mobility Justice, we collaborate and we organize with other folks, and we do the same nonprofit stuff that everybody does, right? We work with agencies, with the city, we get grants to do all the work that we do, which is, to get people on bikes, to help them feel safe, to get them out there with helmets, lights, and to get them just riding and getting out of their car.
Yeah. That's funny. I'm starting to see all the firsts. Like, with you guys as the first people that gave me a helmet, and the first people that gave me bike lights. I never had bike lights before that, but now now I invest in stuff.
Yeah,
I've invested in a good helmet, and I've invested in good lights. But yeah, I'm really grateful for you guys and all of the work that you guys have done. And I'm sure that other bike riders are too. How do you feel about like the crazy fucking bike ride groups? I love them, but it's like, I guess I'm just too old. Sometimes I'm like, man, if I was 20, I'd be riding with these guys through the freeway and doing crazy shit.
That's the vibe.
But I'm just too old for it, and I just like, damn, sometimes I'm just jealous, but damn, that shit looks fun as hell.
It is fun as fuck, man. I think that really taps into that reckless behavior of youth where, like, you can get away with saying, yeah, I'm just fucking around and doing that shit. So, on the advocacy side, when I put on my helmet, it's like, yeah, that's not safe.
Yeah.
People shouldn't be doing that, quote unquote. But when it comes to Erick the person, I'm like, fuck yeah, take over the streets.
Yeah,
take over the freeways, like, make that shit yours.
There's a certain kind of freedom that comes when you're on the bike and when you're in the group. Now, like when we do like critical mass, like it's a big group and you have the freedom of like going through red lights and all that, but that one is, I guess, sanctioned, right? Yeah. Like we're allowed to do that.
It's consistent. It's been happening for a long time.
And we have like a somebody that leads it, and in the tail end, in the front, so it's safe. But then you do have these guys that just like go balls out on the freeway. It just looks like it's fun to break the rules, man. I mean, I'm going to say like that. Yeah, I love that part of it. That part of being like, do you really own this freeway? No, you don't. Like, we can do this too. We can take this freeway. I don't know. I'm going into another.
But that's you perfectly said it. Like, it's fun to break the rules sometimes.
Yeah, but also it's like this is not like nobody really owns it. Like you can't, like, you know what I mean? Like there are, I don't know. It's tricky on both sides.
It's weird dynamics,
right?
Because we're in a city. Our tax money goes into paying for infrastructure, for upkeeping the roads, paying for freeways and shit.
Shout out to all the bike groups.
All the BMX groups out there. I think it's an unspoken thing that when you're out there, you take your life into your own hands.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen some spills in our own little like safe rides, but we've seen some spills and it's not pretty and it's not, be careful out there. And
yeah, that's why we wear helmets, we wear lights, all that stuff.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about bring it back to Boyle Heights. And I know that, a lot of people cried, but you just moved out of Boyle Heights.
So people don't even know. This is the first time I mentioned it publicly.
People are going to cry when they find out you don't live
I don't even
in
post
the
it
9
on
to below
social
3-3
media
anymore.
Nada.
You're not in the
knows.
3-3 anymore.
Like, the only way you would know is if you came to my house party.
Yeah. So tell us about it. Like when we now, did it hurt?
It was.
Did it break your heart a little bit?
So I had to. I did. I want to. I had to. Whatever the reason, I am no longer living in Bull Heights after living here consistently since 2002. What is that, like 20 fucking years,
21.
right? 21 years. And it's I think it's something that everybody who listens to this show and watches it on YouTube will understand, given the current state of like housing in LA.
Yeah.
That is just so fucking shitty. Landlords are out here tripping, like trying to charge you the most for the least.
Yeah.
You know, giving you the landlord special where they're paying over things and like don't fix anything, and it's like a Mickey Mouse job. So, you know, life happens, things move on, and my life is moving on. And, you know, I just turned 39. You know, I'm in a place where, like, I fucking hate being an adult, but I fully am one. So it was one of those things where, like, yeah, no hay otra. Like, I tried to stay in the neighborhood. Do I want to live next door to the gang? No. You know, do I want to live in a shitty apartment that has no insulation and is fucking hot in the summer and freezing in the winter? No. Yeah. Right? So, you know, we all have to decide for ourselves where those boundaries are of like comfort and safety when it comes to space. And yeah, as much as I would want to like stay in the neighborhood and, you know, continue living here and continue building on everything that I have, it's like, nah. I mean, I think at this point I've come to realize that, you know, it's okay to leave. It's okay to not fucking hold it down and not to be like just so like tied to it, because as soon as I left Bull Heights and moved to East LA.
Damn, that's far, bro.
Yeah. It's far enough that it's a completely different vibe. Yeah. But as soon as I left, I was like, oh shit. Like, I don't have to worry about the neighborhood anymore. Like, I don't think folks understand how fucking
you were right. Where you lived, you were right in the middle of where you
I
used
was
to
in
live.
the mix. I was in the mix in
right
person.
Next to the gunshots and shit.
In community and like next to the gang and all of it and all its like, you know, beautiful glory and ugliness. But also I'm like, you know, because I'm a reporter, I'm in the mix in all of these spaces. I was also really heavily entrenched and dug into the digital side of the neighborhood. You know, like almost every other day.
Citizen LA and all that stuff.
Citizen app, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, all of that. I'm always just like cruising the hashtags and seeing what people are posting, sharing what's going on. To the point that I've had like Google alerts for the neighborhood for Bull Heights for like 20 years.
Damn.
Imagine that.
Yeah, some people don't even know what Google alerts are.
Exactly.
I just have that for my name.
Yeah. So, you know, I since because of all of the stuff that I used to do and how deeply involved I was in the neighborhood with everything that was happening from housing, gentrification, violence, how to the most basic shit of like how we're perceived in the media and the mainstream news, and even like shows like Hentified, right, where like Bull Heights is becoming more and more well known outside of like our neighborhood. I was like up in all of that. Like if anybody farted in the neighborhood, I had to find out. I had to know who farted, what the fuck they ate.
And
like,
the other times was I was looking at you for a quote.
Exactly. Like people got
always
mad.
quoted on different shit.
People would get mad that I would be the person that basically de facto represented Bull Heights. So like the last time I got quoted in the news was when fucking people turned the 6th Street Bridge into Dubai Heights. And, you know, everybody was wilding out, and everybody from like KPCC to the LA Times
reached out to you.
You know, we're like, Eric, what do you think about this? And of course, you know,
we outside.
I had an opinion. I had to share it. So
I love that word, that line.
Yeah, man. So as soon as I left, I was like, fuck. I don't have to worry about the neighborhood anymore. But that's also like something that's very self-imposed. Nobody told me to do that. Nobody told me to get this involved. That's just how much I love the neighborhood and how much, you know, I really have so much love for it.
I'm sure you'll still be a part of it in some way.
Oh, for sure. I mean, you know, I came to Espacio the other day, bought some socks, caught up with Nico. Homies still live here, you know, come and like...
Yeah, you don't really leave. Yeah,
you know, do things here and there. I was just across the street at the insurance office. But as soon as I left and I started really it started really hitting me, I was like, damn, like... I can turn off these Google alerts. Yeah. I don't have to go into Twitter and look at the Bull Heights hashtag anymore.
You're sometimes sending me screenshots of like they just shot up your block or something.
Yeah. You know, I don't have to worry about the SWAT team coming in and raiding the house next door. I think as soon as that became
I think
real, like
you just don't know what's happening in your new neighborhood yet.
I think I don't care anymore either. At this point,
So
I'm like,
stay off of the social media so you don't have to worry about it.
But that was like a big thing that I was like, for my own mental health, I was like, shit, like I no longer have to worry about all these things.
Yeah.
And I started realizing how much of that ate up my time doing all these things, reading the news, reading Google alerts, reading hashtags. It's like, fuck. Like that's a good chunk of time that I spent just fucking being a metiche online, finding out what's going on.
Metiche.
Yeah. I mean, it got to the point where anytime something happened in Bow Heights, people automatically knew to reach out to me.
Yeah.
And I would be able to figure out what's going on.
You became the go-to for a lot of things. And for a lot of people, nationally even, like they would find your name and be like, that's the guy, we got to talk to him.
Yep.
So you've actually like been around Bow Heights for a long time and seen like closely a lot of the changes. You went through like the whole gentrification thing, that the battles and all that. What do you have to?
Several of them.
What can you tell me about like how it is now? Or
I think right now with regard to gentrification, what's happened and what's happening now is that it kind of speaks for itself, because I think there's and this is something I talked to Nico and some older heads about, is that there is a lack of context in terms of what is happening today, who's active and why they're active, and who's been active in the past and where that knowledge and history and movement work went, right? Like it's all disconnected. There's a big gap. It goes back all the way back to the Chicano moratorium, to like 1968, to all of that. The neighborhood has been active even way before that. But there's been a consistent history of Bow Heights being active in so many different ways, but each era ends up like just fading into the distance because there isn't able to make a connection between the old and the new. Yeah. And now I'm like
that's
starting
in a
to
lot
see,
of things.
Yeah.
Yeah, even like I'm not gonna change because we could get into a lot of things, but there's a lot of things where that happened. It's like the old and the new don't connect, and so a lot of the work that has been done just falls apart, and then the next group has to redo a lot of the structure building, a lot of the foundation building from the bottom up.
And in that same rebuilding, the same bad habits that caused the collapse of the previous one get picked up again. So
I think there's also a learning process, and some organizations have learned to actually build a structure and foundation that does not fall and can continue to grow.
Yeah, and I think to that you would see who in Bow Heights is active and who is able to make it sustainable. And I think at the same time, though, I think a lot of people who are more radical and more, about that life will point to those institutions and be like, those are the causes of gentrification. Yeah. So a lot of clashing values, a lot of clashing history. But at the end of the day, too, like a lot of these movements self-implode because we're human. Yeah. We go through a lot of shit. We're people. We have our own baggage. We come in different spaces.
And it's groups of people. Not everybody can like stay together. Sometimes people move on and people move out and people
shit happens.
Get married and
all of that. Life happens.
Yeah, life happens to the groups within the groups, and some groups get infiltrated and broken up.
that yet as well.
I mean, let's not get into conspiracy theories, but we know it's true and it happens. Honestly, like this has been so much fun because this is one of the few times that you speak in complete sentences. Usually you just say, yeah, a couple of words here and there. And so I've had so much fun like talking with you and like actually having conversation with you. So I appreciate that a lot. Is there anything that we haven't talked about that you would like to bring up before we round it out?
Just that, I may not be in the neighborhood anymore. I may not be invested in it as I once used to be for a lot of different reasons, but my love and my appreciation and my dedication to the hood is unwavering, right?
Yeah, of course.
My life is taking me different places. Responsibilities have taken me different places. New opportunities are always happening and coming. But the love I have for fucking Bow Heights being my first home, for having so many connections to the homies, so many people and spaces that aren't even around anymore, right? That is forever going to keep me connected to the neighborhood no matter where I live.
Yeah, thank you for that. There's a question that we ask everybody at the end of each show, and I know you've seen a few episodes, so you know what it is. So if a being from another planet stood in front of you and like was able to absorb everything that you've done, all the things that you've worked on, and all of your achievements. And they looked at you and they just said, Erick Huerta, how do you do it?
Begrudgingly.
Begrudgingly? That sounds fucking perfect. Knowing your fucking ass, that's perfect. Fucking grumpy young man over here.
Curmudgeon, yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, man. I really appreciate it. And you guys follow this guy, all of his platforms at El Random Hero. And we'll see you guys next week.